Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Geraghty of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad to have you with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Hope you all had a blessed Easter. Also very happy to report that Jim Geraghty is back after a couple of weeks in Ukraine, another week on spring break. He is tanned, rested, and ready. Big thanks, of course, to Inez Stepman and Andy McCarthy and John Gabriel for filling Jim's shoes, which I assure you is not easy. And Jim, it's great to have you back.
Greg, it's good to be back. I just want one little asterisk to that. I am mildly sunburned, rested, and ready. Good to have a week in Hilton Head after about 2 weeks getting to Ukraine and back. We'll talk more about that later this week, kind of a big full download. Other than the giant alligators in South Carolina, which I'm used to seeing, but they were larger than usual, and we're getting towards mating season where they're a little bit more active. So that was less than perfectly relaxing when we were hanging around Sea Pines and other places on Hilton Head.
We've got our good, bad, and crazy martinis today. Before we get to that, though, it was just at the end of last week that we unfortunately lost one of the very few guests in the history of the Three Martini Lunch, and former Senator Joe Lieberman. John Gabriel and I talked about him towards the end of the week, but I wanted to give you the opportunity, and I know you wanted the opportunity to talk about it as well.
Yeah, look, as you get older, more of the names you grew up with start passing away, and you start wishing, I wish I'd had a chance to talk to that person. And I'm very glad that in the history of this podcast, we don't have guests very often at all. That's partially because we're very selective, and partially because, in particular, I'm lazy. But, that came out of, if I remember correctly, Joe Lieberman had written a Wall Street Journal op-ed saying that Iran and Russia were the two greatest threats to the U.S. And I think we did a segment saying, did he forget about China? What does China have to do to at least, mention them as bronze, put them on the list there? And I think it was Tevi Troy who said, hey, here's the contact for Joe Lieberman. Why don't you call him up and ask? We did a great segment on it. As I remember, Lieberman, I believe this was before the invasion of Ukraine, which definitely puts Russia higher up on that list. And he was talking about the most immediate threats, and that, he felt Iran and Russia qualified. And I think they'd made a very strong and compelling case. And just, you look at who he was, you look at how he lived his life. Love him or hate him, and a lot of people loved him. I think you can genuinely say he tried to live his values as wholeheartedly as he could. And a lot of people on both sides of the aisle ended up respecting him because of that, even if they did not always agree with him on every issue. And so very glad we had the chance to talk to him. He will be missed. He was a mensch, as many folks have said. And God bless him. And I hope the Lieberman family is able to find solace at a time like this.
Well said. And I think he ended up being right about Iran, too, when you think of the tentacles that Iran has with all the terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Hezbollah, and all the carnage they're inflicting. So long term, China may be the bigger threat, and we're certainly concerned about Taiwan. But in terms of immediacy, I think over the past 2+ years, he been proven right. All right, well, let's move to our good martini now. And this one's a few days old, but definitely needs mentioning. And that is last week, the contrast in New York City could not have been more stark. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden were in town. Biden was in town for a glitzy fundraiser that also featured Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, three presidents sitting on the same stage, tons of celebrities. They had to deal with major protests from the left outside Radio City Music Hall as the event went forward. Trump, meanwhile, was at the wake for Jonathan Diller. Jonathan Diller was the early 30s New York Police Department officer who was killed by a career criminal. I mean, just the rap sheet on this guy is a mile long. The guy should not have been on the street, never should have been a threat to Officer Diller. And so when Trump exited from the funeral home, he had some remarks that certainly for Trump, I think were on point and appropriate. And here's part of what he said.
What happened is such a sad event, such a horrible thing. And it's happening all too often. And we're just not going to let it happen. We just can't. 21 times arrested, this thug. And the person in the car with him was arrested many times. And they don't learn because they don't respect. They're not given the respect. The police are the greatest people we have. There's nothing and there's nobody like them. And this should never happen. I just visited with a very beautiful wife that now doesn't have her husband. Stephanie was just incredible. Their child, brand new, beautiful baby, sitting there innocent as can be, and doesn't know how his life has been changed.
So, Jim, obviously people have well-developed opinions of who Donald Trump is, who Joe Biden is, and but when you look at the issues that people are most concerned about in this country, the border seems to be number one, the economy is probably number two, and crime's right up there as well, especially in the big cities. And when you look at which candidate seems to be taking the issue more seriously, I don't think it's too hard to see why there would be a gravitation towards Trump, especially when he carries himself like that. He's obviously got other baggage going forward, but in terms of the contrast last weekend, which one's more interested in making neighborhoods safer? I think Trump's got a pretty strong case.
When I was listening to that, Greg, I was thinking about, I believe it was after the 2020 election, where even though Republicans did not win the presidential race, they gained seats in the House. And the argument about Democrats and the rallying cry, defund the police, had hurt Democrats. And I believe it was Abigail Spanberger, member of the House, and who's now running or intends to run for governor here in Virginia next year, said something like, I never want to hear defund the police ever again. And there were arguments about how common this was amongst Democrats and people insisting, well, they don't really mean defund the police. And then generally leftist activists would say, yes, we absolutely intend to defund the police, that this was not a metaphor, that this was not calling for mild reductions in spending or reprioritization. No, they genuinely wanted this. This is a perception that Democrats have been trying to shed for the better part of 3 years. And you wouldn't think it would be that hard. And by the way, showing up for funerals and denouncing the killing of cops would seem to be about as straightforward, never mind 80-20 issues. You figure that's got to be 99-1% issues, and you don't need that 1% that is pro-murder of cops. That just seems like, and if you want to be seen as the party that is supportive of cops, that does not reflexively demonize them, that does not reflexively find them to be at fault in every police-related shooting, well, then these are the sorts of things you have to do. And I think, Trump is very sharp in the way that he uses this. It may well also be that a lot of cops are Republicans. It may well be that a lot of cops are more on the rightward side of the spectrum, but that didn't happen by accident or in a vacuum. Police, a lot of rank and file police believe that the Democratic Party does not trust them. That the Democratic Party is the one that will be the quickest to blame them for any type of controversial shooting or anything like that. And you can just go back to Ferguson, Missouri. You can go back to numerous cases in this. So you look at that. The other kind of aspect of this, and I wrote about in today's Morning Jolt, is that I don't know if the public perception of the race and how the idea that this is a very close, look, I think it's going to be closely fought and hardly fought throughout from now until November. But right now, I think if the election were held today, besides the obvious joke, if the election were held today, everyone would be confused because they think it's in November. I think Trump would win. I think you look at most of the polling in all the key swing states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, which I'm not so sure really qualifies as, like, Trump has led pretty consistently there. The Biden campaign insists that North Carolina is a swing state. I don't see it in the polling, and I wrote about that in the Corner today. Trump's ahead pretty consistently in all of them. Now, they're not big leads. They're not insurmountable, and it's not like you'd say, oh, put them in the red column. But right now, you'd think Trump would take 5 of 6. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned Nevada. And he's led in Nevada pretty consistently. So you throw in all of that together. Never mind that in Maine, where Trump has won one electoral vote because of one congressional district for the last 2 cycles. He's actually leading statewide right now. Now, there's only one poll that's been done. It was in February. It's conceivable that it could change. But you'd feel pretty good about that. And if you're looking for, you look at the ones that are Florida, Ohio, Iowa, ones that Trump has won, they still look very deep red. So if the Electoral College map, which, oh, by the way, is different numbers than 2020 because of the reallocation of electoral votes after the census, which is a little more friendly to red states and a little more unfriendly to blue states. You add it all up, it's very easy to get Trump to 270 electoral votes, particularly in the situation as it is right now. Yeah, the last bunch of Bloomberg polls had Biden's numbers going up a little bit, but even with that in the mix, these states still look good for Trump. So I'm going to say this, and today's April Fool's Day. Everything I'm saying is by God's honest truth and opinion. But I'd point out that like all Trump has to do is not screw things up between now and November. And as we all know, Trump is not prone to saying controversial or incendiary or crazy things. But right now, the country is fed up with Biden. And in enough states and enough places that Trump would probably not just hit 270, probably would be well of it, and would probably, if not sweep every competitive swing state, probably would win a really good chunk of them to have more than a razor-thin victory.
Yeah, and there's some caveats, obviously, as you already mentioned. One is that Trump may end up standing trial, certainly will he, probably in the Alvin Bragg case up in New York City, at least before Election Day. And some polls have suggested that if he's convicted felon, that could change some people's minds, particularly among independents. The other issue, of course, is money. The Democrats have a lot more money than Republicans, and if we go back to 2012, they certainly were able to dump a ton of money to make people understand who they thought Mitt Romney was, as opposed to where things might have stood otherwise. And
he gave cancer to steel workers.
That's right.
His dog was on the roof. What about your gaffes? Yes. Lovely.
Oh, yeah, all that stuff. And so we will see. But as of right now, Joe Biden's instincts to constantly tack to his increasingly radical base, whether it's, no bail for hardened criminals. Now he's considering amnesty for more folks at the border, telling us that it's just your own lying eyes on inflation, Trans Visibility Day, whatever it is. He's not appealing to the middle right now. Let's just put it that way.
Heaven forbid we export liquid natural gas when we're in a de facto energy war with Russia. Wouldn't want to do that. No, we want to maximize the degree to which the world is putting money into Vladimir Putin's pockets. What's the worst that could happen?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sop to the environmental crowd there. But anyway, talking about the environment, the smart way to do it is with Fast Growing Trees, the biggest online nursery in the United States with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and more than 2 million happy customers here in the United States. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home on top of the wide variety of houseplants they have available.
Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in just 1 or 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever until the earth crashes into the sun.
That's a long time. It's a great deal because we've had friends tell us that in the rare occasion where something doesn't show up exactly as it should, the Alive and Thrive guarantee is legit. They will make it right and with no hassle whatsoever. So right now, Fast Growing Trees has the best deals online, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to the 3 Martini Lunch get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code Martini at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code Martini at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code Martini. Offer is valid for a limited time, and tell them we sent you. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now, and there's certainly a splash of crazy in this as well. The U.S., of course, has gone from shoulder to shoulder with the Israelis to trying to force new elections, to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu, and demanding ceasefires, not standing in the way anymore of UN resolutions demanding immediate ceasefires and so forth. But the U.S., of course, has also been toying, as we've reported on the podcast, with a two-state solution, pushing further in that direction with the Palestinian Authority, the one run by Mahmoud Abbas, as the quote-unquote responsible Palestinian party. I think they finally come to the conclusion that Hamas is never going to fill that role. But when we're looking at what constitutes the more responsible party, it's still pretty darn bad. Politico with this news, which on the surface is mild improvement, but it tells you who we're dealing with here. The U.S. is near a deal with the Palestinian Authority to end its contentious martyr payments for people who commit acts of violence against Israel, according to 2 Biden administration officials. The Martyr Payments Program financially supports Palestinians and their families if they are wounded, imprisoned, or killed while carrying out acts of violence against Israel. It has long infuriated Israelis, no kidding, who say it incentivizes terrorism and they call it pay for slay. Meanwhile, if that weren't enough to cast doubt on whether these people are responsible partners, the Palestinian Authority oversees parts of the West Bank. It is reviled by many Palestinians, as well as Israelis and Arab leaders who see it as corrupt, inefficient, and out of touch. So, Jim, what could possibly go wrong here? I'm sure these people are totally on the up and up.
Greg, as we're going through this, I'm thinking about this recurring pattern I keep seeing. And I say Biden foreign policy, but I think you can extend this back to the Obama days. after the 2016 election, Democrats were kind of reborn again McCarthyites in their opposition to Russia. They were vehemently, and I would posit that Democrats were not angry at Donald Trump because of his association with Vladimir Putin. They were angry at Vladimir Putin for his association with Donald Trump, the biggest villain in their eyes. That's what really made Putin evil. Never mind polonium poisoning anybody who's ever been an opponent to him and stuff like that. But when Biden got into office, he said he wanted a stable and predictable relationship with Vladimir Putin and Russia. They talked about this new START treaty they had signed. And then, of course, Russia broke the treaty the first opportunity. And it's invading Ukraine. And it was kind of this idea of like, why did you look at everything Putin had done and think that you'd be able to get a stable, predictable relationship with Russia? It was kind of this imagining a better, saner, less aggressive, less underhanded, less verstunken evil Vladimir Putin than actually exists in the world. I think you look at our relationship with Xi Jinping in China, and you can see a very similar attitude in which the eagerness with which the Biden administration wanted to hand wave away the spy balloon over sensitive U.S. sites and things like that. You look at the relationship with Iran and the constant pursuit of a nuclear deal with them and the bending over backwards. And, we just haven't given them enough carrots. So, in each case, in Russia, in China, in Iran, the Biden administration keeps imagining a better group of leaders than actually exist. And there's this refusal to recognize, no, these guys really are a bunch of crazy SOBs, and they really do want to destroy us. And there is no reasonable deal that will make them calm down and be our friends. Why would you see anything different from the Palestinians? Why would you look at the Palestinians who have adamantly maintained this idea? Somebody blew themselves up trying to kill Israelis. Let's send them a check. Let's take care of their families. Let's create the greatest incentive that we can to be a suicide bomber. And let us constantly tell Palestinian youth, the best thing you can do with your life is to die young and to take a bunch of Israelis with you. Why wouldn't that be a prerequisite? The same way that, John Kerry kept finding new ways to explain away when they chant death to America in the Iranian parliament, that's just for domestic political consumption. But you know what? I don't like it over here. So, but firstly, if you want me to reach and yell, stop chanting for my death. That's my really unreasonable high bar that you must clear before I make any concessions to you. Stop openly calling for me to die. And apparently, Jim, you're so unreasonable. You just got to see eye to eye with these people. Or we could start opening, Mike Johnson could open up the House, death to Iran, but we don't really want death to Iran. Like a handful of Iranians, the guys in charge of the top, the mullahs who beat the women, those guys we want to die. Everybody, the average Iranian, they're perfectly good people. Or at least they can be perfectly good people. I understand they would really like to keep their Iranian nuclear weapons program. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
All right, let's talk about 4Patriots. You can go to 4patriots.com/martini, where you can find all their great deals, including the return of the deluxe 3-month survival food kits, which are now back in stock after being sold out for more than a year. Not only are they back, they've got brand new recipes that people are raving over, like pancakes, mac and cheese, potato soup, spaghetti and lasagna, and more. These packages are designed to last 25 years. They come in disaster-resistant packaging and 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Also on the website, shop some weekly deals before they are gone, like Leafy Greens Hydro Garden Seed Kit, the 4Patriots Bountiful Green Plant Food, the Sauna Wrap Therapeutic Blanket, and the Solar Go Fridge with the solar panel. You can stash food away and be confident that when a disaster strikes, you and your family will be ready. Go to 4patriots.com/martini to get the deluxe 3-month survival food kit and the peace of mind that you deserve. Plus, get free shipping on orders over $97. That's the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to the crazy martini, but staying on Middle East issues and the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Yesterday, of course, Easter Sunday, and Pope Francis giving his Easter message, which, of course, would be about the Middle East situation. What else would he talk about on Easter? Oh, yeah, the point of Easter. But anyway, he decided to talk about his demand or his suggestion for a ceasefire in Gaza and also a prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. But here's the quote that is head-scratching, to say the least. Quote, "Peace is never made with weapons, but with outstretched hands and open hearts." So, Jim, that's obviously the preferred way to solve differences. But when people decide to take the weapons to you in the first place, you kind of need weapons to push them back and solve the issue. There's a lot of wars that we've fought and won over the years where we did not fire the first shot, but we sure fired the last one. And the same situation is happening now in the Middle East, where Israel certainly didn't start this, but they feel very, very compelled to make sure they end it and end it properly.
Greg, gripe about the Pope on Easter Monday was not really on my to-do list this morning. And I don't like doing it, but there are times when it feels kind of necessary. And Your Holiness, look, I'll pray for peace. We're often urged to do so as Christians. I will, if Vladimir Putin wakes up tomorrow and says, you know what, this whole invasion was a terrible idea. What am I doing? Everybody come back to the pre-war borders. You guys get to keep Crimea. I don't know what I was thinking. Sorry about that. I'll be singing hosannas from the rooftops. If Hamas says, "Oh my God, we've been sending suicide bombers all these years. We've done some terrible things. We should not be doing this anymore. Everybody stop trying to kill Israelis." I'll be thrilled. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I think everyone needs a plan B in case praying for our enemies' hearts to be turned, in case it doesn't happen. I hope they hear God telling you, stop that. Don't do that anymore. But they aren't. And so countries like Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and really every country needs to be able to defend its citizens and needs to be able to protect themselves. And the use of deadly force is unfortunately necessary. I'll share one Ukraine story that's, for obvious reasons, been kind of at the forefront of my mind since I came back. Both first trip when I went in August and up until the very last day, I was able to say that I did not feel like I was in any particular danger at any moment. The first trip we were in Lviv, went up to Kobol, spent about a week or so in Kyiv, and then went down to Odessa, which felt tense. As they say, the front starts at the water's edge. But in August, it passed without incident. Go back the second time last month. Family and friends are not enthused about this and are telling me, "Why are you going back?" Why, we've heard more about rocket attacks and such. But I said, "Look, this is manageable risk. The people I'm with, we don't take unreasonable risks. We do what we can." Even got to Skype home and say, "Hey, everything's going fine." On the evening of the last day there, or the evening before our last day there. Well, 3 a.m., the air raid siren goes off. I've discussed in the past about how the Ukrainians treat it like a New Yorker treats a car alarm going off down the street. They do, and I put up a whole bunch of short videos of me saying we're hearing an air raid alarm here on the streets in Kyiv and showing you that nobody's running around, nobody's panicking. Everybody just kind of goes about their day. 3 a.m. I hear it, and debate going to the air raid shelter and don't, and that's one of the reasons I don't have a particularly dramatic or exciting story. But at 4 a.m., I awaken to a boom and a flash of light, and I go to the window, and I do not hear any screaming or shouting or air raid sirens or anything like that. And I start wondering, did I dream that? What, this feels, it seemed like it happened. There's no rain, there's no thunderstorms. I don't think it was thunder. I think that was the sound of the war. And then around 5 a.m., the air raid all clear announcement comes through. I go and I check, and it turns out that night, Russia had launched 31 missiles at Kyiv, 2 ballistic, 29 cruise missiles. All of them were shot down by Patriot missile batteries. So what I heard was a Patriot missile shooting down a missile over the neighborhood I was in, Podol. Allegedly, wreckage came down in the neighborhood. I went out the following morning. Wherever it was, I couldn't find it. And I did. It was unsurprisingly, very quiet that morning as I was walking around. Your Holiness, what's Ukraine supposed to do? What are they supposed to do when somebody is sending 31 missiles a night into their capital city? Thank God for those Patriot missile batteries. Things would, the loss. By the way, no deaths. A couple injuries from people being hurt by stuff coming down. It started some fires in buildings. When this happens, it is not the worst case scenario, but it is not harmless. And that was our last. We left the following morning, drove down to the border in Moldova. But the following night, they attacked the power grids and power stations. They've been sending rockets. We did not go to Odessa, partially because we were scheduled to visit a drone factory that was an undisclosed location that was totally awesome that I can't wait to tell listeners about. But also that Odessa had been hit with a ballistic missile, and it killed 20-some people and injured 70. Basically levels the city block. They're huge. And what's Ukraine supposed to do? What's Israel supposed to do? What's Taiwan supposed to do with the Chinese Navy exercising right along the middle of the Taiwan Strait? These countries don't have a choice. They have to take action to either prepare to protect themselves or prepare to protect themselves. So, Your Holiness, I would love to see peace break out. But I think weapons are pretty darn necessary. I think history proves it. And I would love to see God come along and change their minds and change the hearts of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and Hamas and all those guys. But they aren't. And I think it's kind of, unreasonable to expect all these smaller, weaker, more vulnerable countries to abstain from obtaining weapons and using them to defend themselves.
Well said. It has to be done. It's not ideal, but the right to defend ourselves is critical, and our allies as well. So, Jim, we are glad you are home safely. Like we said, we'll have our Ukraine special later in the week. It's looking like Friday at this point, so we will look forward to that. In the meantime, we'll chat again tomorrow. See you then.
Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Is it every day April Fool's Day now?
Jim Geraghty, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends and neighbors about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Geraghty. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Monday, and please join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.